I worked out of the Columbia field office, FCC enforcement. Most of what we handled was paperwork, signal violations, unlicensed broadcasters, the occasional pirate radio guy who thought he was sticking it to the man by transmitting from his garage. Nothing that kept me up at night. I was already up at night anyway. Sleep didn't come easy for me. Hadn't in a long time. I'd lie there in my apartment with the blinds shut and the AC running even in winter, because I needed the white noise and my brain would just cycle through everything I hadn't finished. Forms I needed to file. Calls I should have returned. Equipment checks I'd skipped because I was running late. It all stacked up in there, looping. Rachel, my counselor, told me to make lists, physical lists. Write it down, she said, and your brain can let go of it. So I did. I kept a pocket notebook. One of those black moleskins that probably made me look pretentious, but whatever. And every morning I'd write out what needed doing, numbered, specific, cross things off as I went. It helped. Kind of. The job itself was fine. I liked the technical side. Signal analysis, spectrum monitoring, interference tracking. A lot of the other agents hated that stuff. Too much math. Too much time staring at graphs and readouts. They wanted the field work, the face-to-face enforcement, the part where you knock on a door and hand someone a citation. That wasn't really my thing. I took the calls they didn't want. The ones that required sitting in a van for 6 hours with a spectrum analyzer, triangulating some intermittent bleed over on a rural AM station. The ones where you had to read through 30 pages of technical logs to find the 2 sentences that mattered. I didn't mind. It was methodical, predictable, most of the time. The call about Green Bank came in on a Wednesday. I was at my desk, halfway through a compliance report on a cell tower in Sumter, when my supervisor forwarded me the email. Subject line, urgent, NRQZ violation, behavioral incident. That got my attention. The National Radio Quiet Zone was serious business. 13,000 square miles across West Virginia and Virginia, where radio transmissions were heavily restricted to protect the telescopes at Green Bank Observatory. People got fined. Equipment got seized. It wasn't the kind of place where violations just happened by accident. I opened the email. The observatory had detected a powerful, unidentified signal inside the zone. That alone would have been enough to warrant a response. But the rest of it, that's what made it more than paperwork. 2 technicians had abandoned their shift. Just walked out mid-observation. No explanation. No communication. Security found them later sitting in their car in the parking lot, unresponsive. Not unconscious. Just staring. When they finally snapped out of it, neither of them could explain what had happened. They didn't remember leaving their posts. Several observation sessions had been completely destroyed. Data corrupted, recordings wiped, equipment left running in states that made no sense. The email didn't use the word trance, but that's what I thought when I read it. That's the word that stuck in my head. I should have handed it off. This was bigger than interference, bigger than my usual scope, but I didn't. I called the number at the bottom of the email and told them I'd take it. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I just wanted something that wasn't another cell tower report. I don't know. I figured someone had to go, and I was already reading the file, so it might as well be me. They told me to drive to Lewisburg and meet the team there. Team. That should have been a clue. The drive took about 4 hours. I left Columbia just after lunch, took Route 26 through the mountains, watched the landscape go from flat sprawl to steep ridges and narrow valleys. I didn't mind driving. It gave me time to think. Time to go over the details again. I kept coming back to the technicians. The way the report described them, blank, unresponsive, no memory of the event. That wasn't normal interference. That wasn't someone running an illegal CB radio or a faulty transmitter bleeding into the wrong frequency. That was something else. I pulled into Lewisburg around 4:30 and found the meeting point, a Quality Inn just off the interstate. The parking lot had 3 other cars, all government plates except one contractor van. Phyllis Marsh was waiting in the lobby. I knew Phyllis. She was my manager's manager, regional lead for field operations. Seeing her there in person was unusual. Phyllis didn't do field inspections. She did conference calls and budget meetings and compliance audits. She looked exactly like she did on video calls. Blonde hair pulled back tight, blazer over a polo, badge lanyard, clipboard in hand. She had that permanent expression of someone who was already annoyed before you opened your mouth. "Gutierrez," she said. Not a question. "Yeah. Hi." She didn't smile, just nodded and gestured toward the hallway. "We're in the conference room. I'll brief everyone together." Everyone. That word again. I followed her down a hallway that smelled like stale coffee and lemon cleaner. The conference room was small, barely bigger than a closet, with a folding table and 6 chairs. 3 people were already inside. Phyllis didn't waste time. "This is Corey Gutierrez, FCC Enforcement. He'll be handling the technical assessment." I gave a small wave. Didn't know what else to do. "Braden Fig," Phyllis continued, pointing to a guy in work boots and a utility belt. "Contractor. Electrical." Braden nodded at me. He was younger than me, maybe late 20s, built solid. He had the kind of hands that were used to actual work, scarred knuckles, a burn mark on one forearm. He didn't look nervous, just ready. "Sharon Warner," Phyllis said, moving on. "CDC, consulting on the behavioral component." Sharon was small, slim, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore rectangular glasses and had a notebook open in front of her, pen already in hand. She looked up at me and gave a polite smile. Professional, clinical, CDC. That word sat heavy. "And Hayden Porter, West Virginia State Police. He'll be our escort." Hayden was big, 6'2", maybe more. Trooper uniform, vest, radio clipped to his shoulder. He had the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without meaning to. He nodded at me, and I nodded back. Phyllis set her clipboard on the table. "We're treating this as a standard enforcement inspection with health and safety oversight. The Observatory reported interference within the quiet zone. Our job is to locate the source, document the violation, and issue compliance notices." She slid a stack of papers across the table. Pre-printed trespass notices, violation forms, all filled out except for the signature lines. That bugged me a little. Standard enforcement didn't usually come with a CDC consultant. Standard enforcement didn't need a state trooper escort. And standard enforcement definitely didn't have paperwork ready to go before we'd even seen the site. I didn't say anything, just added it to the list in my head. Phyllis kept talking. "We'll convoy to the observatory, 2 vehicles. Porter will lead in his unit. The rest of us will follow in the van. Gutierrez, Fig, and Warner with me. We'll arrive on site, conduct the inspection, locate and disable the source if possible, and return here for debrief." She said it like we were checking a gas station for a faulty neon sign. Braden spoke up. "What's the signal profile?" Phyllis glanced at her clipboard. "Intermittent, high power, no identifiable modulation pattern. The observatory hasn't been able to lock it down." "So we don't know what we're looking for," Braden said. "We'll know it when we find it," Phyllis said. Flat. Certain. Sharon made a note in her book. I watched her handwriting, small, neat, controlled. "What about the technicians?" I asked. "The ones who walked off." Phyllis looked at me. "They've been released. Medical clearance. No underlying conditions identified. But they don't remember what happened." "Correct." I waited for her to add something. She didn't. "Is that normal?" I asked. "That's why Warner's here," Phyllis said. She didn't elaborate. Sharon glanced up from her notebook, but didn't say anything. Hayden shifted in his seat. "We expecting trouble?" "No," Phyllis said. but protocol requires law enforcement presence given the medical incident. You're there to facilitate and secure the site if necessary." Hayden nodded. He didn't look concerned, just doing his job. I looked around the table. A field manager who should have been behind a desk, a contractor electrician, a CDC consultant, a state trooper, and me. It was the kind of team you'd assemble if you didn't know what you were dealing with, but wanted to cover all the bases, or if you knew exactly what you were dealing with and didn't want to say it out loud. Phyllis closed her clipboard. "We leave in 10 minutes. Check your gear, use the restroom, whatever you need. We won't be stopping once we're on the road." Everyone stood. Braden headed out to his van. Sharon stayed at the table, still writing. Hayden stepped into the hallway to make a call. I grabbed my notebook and added a couple lines. Pre-printed notices, CDC on site, technicians, no memory, Phyllis in person. I didn't know what it added up to yet, but it felt like pieces of something. Phyllis was watching me. "Problem, Gutierrez?" "No," I said, "just making sure I'm clear on everything." "Good. Stay close once we're there. Don't wander off." I nodded. 10 minutes later, we were in the vehicles. Phyllis drove the van, a white Ford Transit with FCC decals and a rack of equipment in the back. I sat shotgun. Braden and Sharon were behind us. Hayden's cruiser pulled out first, lights off, and we followed. The road climbed into the hills. Trees pressed in on both sides, dense and dark, even though it was still light out. The signal on my phone dropped to nothing. Nobody talked much. Phyllis kept her eyes on the road. Braden was checking something on his tablet. Sharon stared out the window, notebook resting on her lap. I went over the list again in my head. The signal. The technicians. The team composition. The paperwork already filled out. It didn't fit together cleanly. That bothered me. Rachel's voice in my head. When things don't make sense, write down what you know. Not what you think, just what's true. What I knew. We were heading to a radio observatory to investigate interference. 2 people had experienced some kind of fugue state. The government had sent 5 people from 4 different agencies to deal with it. What I didn't know. Why? The van hit a pothole and jolted. Phyllis didn't slow down. Ahead of us, Hayden's cruiser turned onto a smaller road. No signs. Just gravel and trees. I could feel it starting. That tightness in my chest, the buzz in my head that meant my brain was spinning up. I pressed my thumb against my index finger, counted backward from 10. It helped. A little. We kept driving. The gravel ended at a gate that wasn't locked. Hayden got out, pushed it open, drove through. Phyllis followed in the van. Past the gate, the road turned to paved asphalt again, and the trees pulled back enough to show a clearing. There were 3 buildings total. One huge white dish on the left, tilted up toward nothing in particular. A smaller metal shed with antennas on the roof, and straight ahead, a low control building with dark brick and narrow windows and a flat roof with vents. The sun hadn't set yet, but it was low enough that the whole clearing had that washed-out pre-dusk color where everything looks a little gray. Hayden parked near the front of the control building. Phyllis pulled the van in next to him. I got out first. My legs felt stiff from the drive, and I rolled my shoulders once, trying to shake off the tightness. The air smelled fine. Pine, dirt, nothing chemical. But the building's front doors were propped open with a yellow plastic cone wedged under each one. That was wrong. I've done maybe a dozen site inspections over the years. Radio stations, cell towers, a couple university labs. Places that deal with sensitive equipment don't leave their doors propped open. They control access. They lock down. They don't let bugs and weather and random humidity drift through whenever. Phyllis came around the front of the van with her clipboard. Braden hopped out of the back, adjusting his tool belt. Sharon stepped down last, phone already in her hand. "Front entrance is compromised," I said. Probably sounded more formal than I meant. "Doors are propped." Phyllis glanced at them. Noted. Hayden walked over, thumbs hooked in his vest. "Could be ventilation issue. AC goes out, people prop doors? Maybe, but it still bugged me. We walked toward the entrance together, Hayden in front, Phyllis right behind him, me and Sharon and Braden trailing. The building had that institutional look. Brick, narrow windows with blinds pulled halfway down, metal trim around the door frames. A sign next to the entrance read, Green Bank Observatory. Authorized personnel only in white letters on green. Hayden stepped through first. I followed. The beeping started immediately. Not loud, just steady. A security keypad mounted on the wall to the right, maybe 6 feet inside the entrance. Little gray box with a numeric pad and a red LED blinking in time with the beep. Beep, beep, beep. Same interval every time. Maybe 1 beat per second. Perfectly even. Someone left it unlocked, Hayden said, looking at the panel. Or bypassed, Braden muttered behind me. I stared at the keypad. The beeping didn't sound like an alarm. Alarms escalate. They get louder or faster or they cycle tones. This was just a heartbeat, mechanical, constant. Phyllis moved past us into the hallway. Stay together. We're documenting as we go. The hallway stretched straight ahead with doors on both sides and fluorescent panels overhead. Most of the lights were on, but 2 fixtures were out, leaving dark gaps every 10 feet or so. The air felt thick. Not hot exactly, but stale. I breathed through my nose and tasted recycled air that had been sitting too long in one place. Sharon walked next to me, notebook open, pen moving. HVAC might be cycling incorrectly, she said quietly. Yeah. I kept my eyes forward. The beeping from the keypad was still audible behind us, muffled now but steady. We passed the first door on the left. It had a placard that read storage and a handle with no lock. Closed. The next door on the right was open a few inches and I could see part of a desk inside, a dark monitor, a coat draped over a chair. Then I saw the clocks. 3 of them, mounted on the wall above a bulletin board cluttered with safety notices and a faded poster about radio interference. Standard office clocks, white faces, black hands, black numbers, the kind you see in every government building. They all showed different times. The first one read 4:53, the second read 6:12, the third read 2:37. I stopped walking. Sharon noticed. What? I pointed. She looked up, wrote something in her notebook, didn't say anything. Phyllis kept moving ahead, heels clicking on the linoleum. Hayden stayed close to her. Braden glanced at the clocks, frowned, kept walking. I pulled out my phone to check the actual time. No signal still, but the clock function worked. 5:41. None of the wall clocks were even close. Corey, Phyllis called from ahead. Keep up. I shoved my phone back in my pocket and walked faster. The hallway turned left. We followed it and the sound changed. Not the keypad anymore. Something else. A mechanical hum, low and rhythmic, and under that, a sharper sound. Clicking. Repetitive. We rounded the corner and I saw him. A guy standing in front of a big office copier, feeding blank sheets of paper into the document tray one at a time. He wore a wrinkled button-up, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a lanyard with an Observatory ID clipped to his chest. Thinning gray hair combed straight back. Narrow face, ink smudges on his fingers. The copier was running. The output tray on the side was overflowing with printed pages, some of them spilling onto the floor in a messy pile. I stepped closer. The pages weren't blank. They were packed with numbers. Tight rows, edge to edge, no margins, just digits. No pattern I could see at a glance, just numbers. The guy didn't look at us. He pulled another blank sheet from the stack on the counter next to him, placed it carefully in the feeder tray, pressed the button. The copier hummed. A new page slid into the output tray. Phyllis stepped forward, clipboard against her chest. "Excuse me." The guy didn't respond. He reached for another blank sheet. "Sir," Phyllis said, louder now. She pulled her badge from the lanyard and held it up. "I'm Phyllis Marsh, Federal Communications Commission. We're conducting an inspection. I need to speak with your site supervisor." The guy placed the blank sheet in the feeder, pressed the button. Phyllis's mouth tightened. She glanced at Hayden, then back at the guy. "Can you hear me?" The guy opened his mouth. 792411038, he said. His voice was flat, monotone, no inflection at all. He didn't look at Phyllis, didn't look at any of us, just kept his eyes on the copier and kept feeding sheets. 665209174. I felt my jaw tighten. The cadence of it was too even, too smooth, no breath between phrases, just a steady stream. 23805. Sharon stepped forward, pen poised over her notebook. She tilted her head, leaning in slightly, watching his face. 9114476. The rhythm locked in. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, but it had weight, physical weight, like it pushed into the space between my ears and sat there. 3028. Sharon leaned closer, her pen moving in small marks across the page. I grabbed her arm and yanked her back. She stumbled, caught herself against the wall, stared at me. "What are you—" "Don't," I said. My voice came out sharper than I meant. "Don't listen that close." Phyllis turned toward me, eyebrows up. "Gutierrez." I didn't let go of Sharon's arm. The guy kept reciting. Same rhythm, same flatness. 882091. I felt it in my jaw, not in my ears, in my jaw. A pressure, low and crawling, like the sound was bypassing everything normal and going straight into the bone. My teeth wanted to move. My mouth wanted to shape the numbers. I let go of Sharon and took a step back. 79241103888. He'd looped, same sequence, starting over. Braden moved to the side, eyeing the copier's output tray. He bent down, picked up one of the printed pages, held it up to the light. "These are all the same," he said. "Same number set, over and over. 665209174. Hayden put a hand on his radio but didn't key it. He looked at Phyllis. "Should I restrain him?" "On what grounds?" Phyllis said. But her voice had lost some of its edge. She was staring at the guy now, clipboard held a little lower. 23805. I pressed my thumb against my index finger, counted backward from 10 in my head. The buzzing didn't stop. It sat in my jaw and hummed. Sharon was writing again, but she stayed back this time. Her hand moved fast, shorthand I couldn't read. The copier kept running. The guy kept feeding blank sheets. The output tray kept spitting pages covered in numbers. Phyllis cleared her throat. She straightened, pulled a pre-printed form from her clipboard, held it out toward the guy even though he wasn't looking. "Sir, this is a formal notice of inspection under federal authority. You are required to provide access to all equipment and personnel on site. If you cannot comply, we will proceed with enforcement action. 9114476. She lowered the form, looked at Hayden again, looked at me. I shook my head. I didn't have an answer. 302888291. The air felt heavier now. The HVAC hum was still there, but underneath it the cadence kept threading through, low and invasive and wrong in a way I couldn't name. This wasn't interference, wasn't a signal violation, wasn't anything on the pre-printed forms Phyllis had handed out in the conference room. The building was already off. The propped doors, the clocks, the stale air. The guy reciting numbers with no breath and no eye contact, while a copier spat out pages no one would ever read. We'd walked into something procedural wouldn't fix. Braden moved first. That's what I remember most clearly about that moment. While the rest of us just stood there listening to Wayne recite that same loop of numbers, Braden turned away from the copier and started looking around. "Gotta be something generating this," he said, mostly to himself, I think. He headed down the hall past us, checking doorways. I followed. Probably should have asked Phyllis first, but honestly, I was relieved to have something to do besides stand there and feel my jaw trying to copy the rhythm. The first door on the right opened into a small office. Desk, 2 filing cabinets, one of those motivational posters about teamwork. Nothing obvious. Braden moved on. Second door was locked. He rattled the handle once and kept going. Third door opened into what looked like a server room or equipment closet. Metal racks along 2 walls, maybe 5 feet tall, holding radio receivers and what I recognized as spectrum analyzers, signal generators, test equipment. Standard monitoring setup for a place like this. Most of it was dark, but one receiver on the middle rack had a green power LED lit up. Braden spotted it at the same time I did. He stepped closer, leaning in to check the back panel. "Antenna ports capped," he said. I looked. He was right. The BNC connector had a 50-ohm terminator screwed on. No antenna connected. No input. "So it's not receiving anything," I said. "Shouldn't be." Braden tapped the front panel with one knuckle. The LED stayed green. "But it's on." I figured we'd found it. Some kind of misconfigured test device left running, maybe looping a stored signal or playing back corrupted data. That happened sometimes. Equipment got set to the wrong mode, started outputting garbage, and nobody noticed until it caused interference. Simple fix. Unplug it, document the violation, write up the notice. "Kill it," I said. Braden reached behind the rack and pulled the power cable. The green LED went dark, and for maybe 2 seconds I felt the whole group pause. I don't know how else to describe it, like our bodies all expected relief at the same time. I was still standing in the equipment room doorway, but I could feel it. This collective held breath from everyone in the hallway behind me, waiting for the noise to stop. It didn't stop. Instead, it got worse. The numbers kept going. Wayne's voice from the copier area, still flat and rhythmic. But now I heard it coming from somewhere else too, somewhere above us. I looked up. The ceiling vent was rattling slightly, and I swear I could hear the sequence coming through it. Faint, but distinct. 7924110388. "You hear that?" Braden said. "Yeah." Then the light fixture started. Not the bulbs themselves. The ballast. That electronic hum fluorescent lights make. Except it wasn't steady. It was pulsing. And the pulse matched the cadence of the numbers. I stepped back into the hallway. Phyllis was staring up at the ceiling. Sharon had her notebook out, but she wasn't writing. Hayden had one hand on his radio. The copier clicked. Not the normal mechanical sound of rollers feeding paper. This was different, sharper, timed. I counted the intervals without meaning to and realized it was matching the sequence too. Every click landing exactly where a number should be. Hayden's radio crackled. Static first, then something underneath it. A voice maybe. Or voices, layered and wrong. Then it cleared up and started broadcasting the numbers. Same flat tone as Wayne. Same perfect rhythm. Coming through the radio speaker at Hayden's shoulder like the signal had been waiting for an open channel and finally found one. Hayden grabbed the radio and turned the volume knob down. Didn't help. He switched channels. The numbers followed. He tried again. Same thing. "It's on every frequency," he said. His voice sounded tight. Wayne turned toward us, still feeding sheets into the copier with one hand. But now he was holding up the printed pages with the other, showing them to us. His face had this look, not quite a smile, but pleased, focused, like he'd finished an assignment and wanted us to see he'd done it right. That's when I felt it in my own jaw again, that pressure, the urge to open my mouth and say the sequence out loud, to get it right, to match the rhythm exactly. It scared me more than the noise. I pulled out my notebook, the black moleskin Rachel told me to keep. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Strong impulse to repeat sequence, involuntary." Feels like correction reflex. My hand was shaking a little, but writing helped. Putting it on paper made it external, something I could look at instead of something trying to get out. "We need hearing protection," Phyllis said. Her voice had that command tone back, but it was brittle around the edges. "Now." Braden already had his pack off. He unzipped a side pocket and pulled out a box of foam earplugs, the bright orange kind you roll up and stick in your ears. He handed them around. I took 2, rolled them tight between my fingers and pushed them in. They expanded and the volume dropped. Phyllis did the same. Sharon hesitated, still staring at Wayne, then took hers. Hayden got his in one-handed while trying to turn off his radio with the other. It helped. For maybe 5 seconds, it actually helped. Then I felt it in the floor, vibration, rhythmic, coming up through the soles of my boots and into my legs. I shifted my weight, and it was still there, steady and pulsed and timed exactly to the sequence I could barely hear anymore through the plugs. The walls, too. I put my hand flat against the painted cinder block and felt it humming. Not random, structured, the same intervals. I pulled my own over-ear muffs out of my jacket pocket, the kind I use at server facilities or near transmission towers, rated for 32 decibels. I put them on over the foam plugs. Double protection. The sound dropped almost to nothing, but the vibration stayed, and I could still feel my jaw wanting to move, my teeth trying to click together in rhythm, my tongue pressing against the roof of my mouth like it was shaping words I wasn't saying. I looked at Sharon. She was standing next to Phyllis, notebook still in her hands, and her lips were moving. Not speaking, just moving, silently forming shapes. I watched for 3 seconds and realized she was counting, her mouth making the same motions over and over. 7924110388. She didn't seem to notice. I figured we needed to find where this thing started. Some central point, kill it there, and maybe everything else would stop. Phyllis made a gesture. Forward, keep moving. And we went deeper into the building. I pulled my notebook out again and started tracking our route. Left at the copier. 20 paces, right turn, 15 more. Door marked server access. I wrote it all down because I didn't trust my phone, and I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't counting numbers. The hallway had framed photos on the walls. Telescope images, I think. Nebulas and star clusters and that kind of thing. Pretty standard for an observatory. I passed one that showed some kind of radio dish lit up at night, all white metal and geometric angles. I glanced at it while I walked. In the glass reflection, I saw myself move. Then, about half a second later, I saw myself move again. Same motion, delayed. Like watching a video feed with lag, I stopped, looked directly at the glass. My reflection stopped too. Then it stopped again, a beat later, settling into position like it had to catch up. That part bugged me more than a little. I forced myself to look away, wrote it down in my notebook. Photoglass. Delayed reflection approx. 0.5 seki. Repro effect or actual lag. My handwriting was worse than usual. I kept walking, didn't look at any more photos. Braden reached the server room door first. It was labeled in white vinyl letters, half peeled. He pushed it open, and we all felt it immediately. The sound was cleaner in there. I don't know how else to describe it. In the hallway, it had been muffled, coming through vents and walls, and Wayne's voice and Hayden's radio all layered together. In the server room, it was sharper, more focused, like the signal preferred dense electronics, like it had found better speakers. The room was narrow, maybe 10 feet by 20, with server racks lining both walls. Most of the equipment was older, beige towers, dusty network switches, bundled cables zip-tied to the rails. LEDs blinked in uneven patterns. Green, amber, red. The air smelled like warm plastic and ozone. Braden stepped between the racks and put his hand flat against one of the tower cases. "It's vibrating," he said. His voice was muffled through the earplugs, but I heard him fine. "Way too hard. This isn't normal drive activity." I moved closer. He was right. I could see it. The whole rack was shaking slightly, a steady, rhythmic hum that matched the sequence intervals. The metal frame rattled against the mounting bolts. Phyllis came in behind us, Sharon right next to her. "Shut it down," Phyllis said. She didn't phrase it as a question. Braden looked back at her. "All of it?" "All of it. This might be running active instruments, telescope positioning, environmental controls, data collection. I don't care." Phyllis's voice was tight. "Shut it down." Braden nodded once. He moved to the first rack and started tracing cables, identifying what went where. He's good at that. I've worked with enough contractors to know the difference between someone who just pulls plugs and someone who actually knows what they're doing. He powered down the first rack in sequence. Soft shutdown commands through the keyboard of a terminal nobody had logged out of. Then physical switches, then finally the breaker. The LEDs went dark row by row. Fans spun down. The numbers kept going. He moved to the second rack. Same process. Controlled, methodical. I appreciated that, even though I knew it probably wouldn't work. Third rack. Fourth. The room got quieter as the equipment stopped, but the sound itself, the cadence, the sequence, it didn't change. It just came from somewhere else. The walls, maybe, or the floor, or inside my head. I couldn't tell anymore. When Braden killed the last server, the room was dark except for the glow from the hallway behind us. The numbers didn't stop. And then something else started. A low undertone, deeper than the sequence. It sat under everything else, a bass hum that I felt more than heard. It put pressure in my teeth. Not pain exactly, just pressure. Like my molars wanted to grind together, like my jaw wanted to clench and release in rhythm. I wrote it down. New undertone subsonic, pressure in jaw, teeth, after full server shutdown. Sharon made a small noise. I looked over. Her phone was buzzing. She pulled it out of her jacket pocket, frowning. The screen lit up her face. Notification after notification, lighting up the display in rapid pulses. "I don't have service," she said, confused, stating a fact that didn't make sense. She tapped the screen, opened something. Her frown deepened. "I didn't," she started. Then she dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a crack, screen down. She stepped back from it like it had burned her. "What?" Phyllis said. Sharon didn't answer right away. She was staring at the phone on the ground. "Drafts," she said finally. "Text message drafts. I didn't write them." Braden crouched and picked up the phone, turning it over. The screen was still on. He looked at it for 2 seconds, then held it up so I could see. The Drafts app was open. Dozens of unsent messages. All the same thing. Rows and rows of numbers. 7924110388. 665209174. The sequence, repeating. No contact selected. Just the numbers filling the screen. "I didn't type that," Sharon said again. Her voice was steady but wrong. Too flat. I believed her. We kept moving. I don't remember who decided. Maybe Phyllis gave another hand signal. Maybe we all just knew we couldn't stay in the dark server room with the undertone pressing into our teeth. The hallway continued past the server room. Fewer doors now. More of the telescope photos on the walls. I didn't look at them. We passed a restroom, a supply closet. Then the hallway opened slightly into a wider area with a few chairs and a small table. Break room, probably. There was a counter along one wall with a microwave, a coffee maker, a mini fridge. The microwave was running. I heard it first. That specific hum microwaves make, the magnetron cycling. I looked over. The turntable was spinning, empty, no food inside, just the glass plate rotating under the light. And the sound was coming from it, not the hum, the sequence, the numbers, clearer than anywhere else, like the microwave was broadcasting. Then I saw her, a woman sitting on the floor with her back against the counter, directly below the microwave. She wore an Observatory polo, dark slacks, chestnut brown hair disheveled. Her eyes were half open, but she wasn't looking at anything. Her throat was moving. Small motions, like she was trying to speak. Her mouth would open slightly. Her jaw would shift, her throat would work, but no sound came out. Or if it did, I couldn't hear it over the microwave and the sequence and the undertones still pressing into my teeth. "Hey," I said. I moved closer, crouching down to her level. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes tracked toward me, slow, like it took effort. Her throat kept moving. I looked at her hands. They were covered in tiny cuts. Not deep, just surface scratches. Dozens of them, crisscrossing her palms and fingers. Fresh. Some still had little beads of blood. Then I saw the table. Torn strips of magnetic tape were scattered across the surface. Brown tape, the kind used in old reel-to-reel systems. Shredded, wet-looking. Some pieces were still stuck together in clumps. Others were individual ribbons no wider than a shoelace. The woman's hands were still damp. I realized she'd done it, ripped the tape apart. By hand, recently. The edges were frayed where she'd torn them, and her fingers had the cuts to match. I wrote it down. Staff member, unresponsive, tape destroyed manually, hands cut, still trying to speak. The microwave kept spinning behind her. Her throat kept moving, and I didn't know what the tape had been, or why she'd destroyed it, or what she was trying to say. Hayden moved before I could say anything about the tape or her hands. Just stepped forward with that same cop reflex I'd seen when we first entered the building. Protect first, assess later. He crouched down next to Dolly, reaching toward her shoulder, probably planning to check her pulse or get her attention or help her up. The numbers got louder, not gradually, just immediately, like someone turned a knob. The volume went from barely manageable through double hearing protection to something I felt in my entire skull. The undertones surged with it, creating pressure behind my eyes that made me want to squeeze them shut and keep them shut. Hayden's eyes went wide. His hand froze about 6 inches from Dolly's shoulder. Then his mouth opened, and he started talking. 792411038866520917423805911447630288. Fast. Way too fast. Like he was trying to finish the sequence before something stopped him. Like getting to the end mattered more than breathing or blinking or anything else. His voice didn't sound flat like Wayne's had. It sounded urgent, desperate maybe. I took a step back without deciding to. Phyllis moved faster. She grabbed Hayden by the back of his vest with both hands and hauled backward, her boots scraping on the linoleum. Hayden didn't stop. He kept going, leaning forward against her grip, his hand still reaching toward Dolly even as Phyllis pulled him away. 79241103886652. Porter, stop, Phyllis said. Her voice was sharp but controlled. Command tone. You need to stop talking. He didn't. He kept repeating the sequence, looping back to the start every time, his breath coming in short gasps between number clusters. His free hand came up and reached for Dolly again, fingers stretching. Phyllis yanked harder. Hayden resisted. Not like he was fighting her exactly, more like he had somewhere he needed to be, and she was in the way. Driven. That's the word. He twisted in her grip, trying to turn back toward Dolly, and I saw his face. His expression wasn't angry or scared. It was focused, intense, like he just remembered something critically important, and if he didn't finish this right now, everything would fall apart. Braden stepped in and grabbed Hayden's other arm. Together, he and Phyllis pulled Hayden back 3 full steps from Dolly. Hayden's boots dragged. Then he planted his feet and pushed forward again, still reciting. 238059114476302 That's when I noticed the sound coming from his chest, not his voice. Something else. A tinny, crackling version of the sequence, slightly out of sync with his mouth. I stared at his uniform vest and realized it was his body camera, the small black rectangle mounted on his left chest strap. The microphone was covered. I could see the fabric of his uniform pressing against it, but it was broadcasting anyway. The numbers came through in a flat digital tone, layered over Hayden's voice, creating this awful doubled effect. Sharon had her notebook out. She was writing fast, her hand shaking, but she kept writing. I looked back at Dolly. She hadn't moved. Her throat still worked in those small, silent motions. Her eyes tracked slowly between Hayden and the rest of us, unfocused. Phyllis finally got Hayden back to the break room entrance. He stopped pushing forward, but he didn't stop talking. The numbers kept coming, uninterrupted, his breath ragged between repetitions. "Porter," Phyllis's voice was harder now. "Look at me." He didn't. His eyes stayed locked on Dolly. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Proximity trigger. Physical contact attempt caused surge. H compromised. Repeating sequence. Body cam broadcasting despite covered mic. Urgent compulsion observable." My hand was shaking worse than Sharon's. Braden asked if we should restrain him. Phyllis didn't answer right away. I figured she was running the same calculation I was. What grounds, what protocol, what happens if we make it worse? The volume started to drop. Slowly. Like someone easing the knob back down. Hayden's voice got quieter, then stuttered, then stopped mid-number. He blinked. Looked at Phyllis, then Braden, then me. His body camera went silent. "What?" He stopped, swallowed. "What happened?" Nobody answered him. Phyllis let go of his vest but didn't step back. "Do you remember what you were doing?" Hayden looked past her at Dolly, still sitting against the counter. "I was going to help her. She's..." He stopped again. His hand came up to his chest, fingers brushing his body camera. "You repeated the sequence," Sharon said. Her voice was quiet but steady, clinical. "For approximately 45 seconds. You appeared unable to stop voluntarily." Hayden stared at her, then at me. I nodded. "Okay," he said. He didn't sound okay. Okay. I needed a plan, something we could actually do instead of just standing here watching people break down one by one. I thought about the building layout, what we'd seen so far, what made sense. "The dish," I said. Everyone looked at me. "The satellite dish outside. It's listening to something. Has to be. That's what these places do. They receive signals, process them, record them. If we can get to the main control room, we can physically redirect it, point it away from whatever it's locked onto." Phyllis frowned. "You don't know what it's locked onto." "No," I admitted. "But it's a guess we can act on. Better than shutting down equipment that doesn't stop anything." Braden nodded slowly. "Manual override, azimuth and elevation controls. Should be in the primary operations room." "You know where that is?" Phyllis asked. "Should be centrally located. Ground floor or basement. Probably marked." It was a guess, all of it. But it was something we could control, or try to, and that mattered more than waiting for this to get worse. Phyllis looked at Dolly one more time, then back at me. "We move together. No one separates. Porter, you stay in the middle." Hayden opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then just nodded. We left Dolly there. I didn't like it. but I didn't see another option. Sharon hesitated in the doorway, looking back, then followed. The hallway past the break room felt wrong. I couldn't prove it. The walls were the same painted cinder block, the floor the same scuffed linoleum, the lighting the same mix of working and dead fluorescence. But something about the proportions was off. The corridor felt longer than it should, not by much. Just enough that I kept expecting to reach the next corner or doorway, and it took 3 or 4 more steps than made sense. I counted paces in my head, then stopped because I couldn't trust I was counting accurately. Braden was ahead of me. He walked steady, checking doors as we passed. First one on the left, supply closet, shelves of paper and toner cartridges. Second one on the right, bathroom, single stall, empty. Third one. He stopped, pushed the door open wider. I looked past his shoulder and saw stacks, floor to ceiling, printed pages, all identical, covered in the number sequence. Tight rows, no margins, exactly like the ones spilling from Wayne's copier. The stacks were neat, organized, like someone had been filing them carefully. "That's a closet," Braden said. "Yeah. Shouldn't it be?" He checked something on his phone, frowning at a layout diagram that must have been cached. "This should be an exterior exit. Emergency door to the east parking lot." I looked at the stacks of paper again. Thousands of pages, probably. All the same sequence, printed and stored. "The building's insulating itself," Sharon said from behind me. She'd stopped writing. Her notebook hung loose in one hand, lining the walls with its own output. That bugged me more than it probably should have. Not just the wrongness of it, but the implication that this thing, whatever it was, had been going long enough to fill closets, to replace emergency exits with storage. We kept moving. Fourth door, another closet, more stacks. Fifth door, locked, but I could see light underneath. Sixth door, open office, empty, with 3 desks and a whiteboard covered in equations I didn't recognize. The hallway turned left, then right, then left again. I lost track of how many turns. My sense of direction was pretty good normally. I'd worked in enough federal buildings and server facilities to navigate by exit signs and room numbers, but this didn't track. We should have looped back to somewhere familiar by now. Braden stopped at a door marked Primary Operations in stenciled letters. The sound changed, got quieter. For half a second, I thought maybe we'd found shielding, lead-lined walls or Faraday mesh or something that actually blocked the signal. Then I realized it wasn't shielding. It was restraint, like the sound was holding back, waiting. Braden pushed the door open. The room was bigger than I expected, 20 feet by 30 maybe. 3 walls lined with console desks, old CRT monitors mixed with newer flat panels, equipment racks filled with receivers and signal processors and patch panels. The far wall had a large window overlooking the dish outside, though it was too dark now to see much, besides our own reflections. One console in the center was active. A single monitor showed a spectrum analyzer display, a bright, narrow carrier trace sitting in the middle of an otherwise clean waterfall. The trace looked intentional, precise, not noise, not interference, a signal. Below the spectrum display, a countdown timer ran, 001437, 14 minutes, 36 seconds, 35, 34. I stared at it, counted backward from 10 in my head, pressed my thumb against my index finger. "Phyllis," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "What is that?" She didn't answer right away. She was looking at the same screen, her face carefully neutral in that way people get when they're deciding how much to say. "Phyllis." She took a breath, let it out slow. "An earlier team was sent," she said, each word precise, controlled. "Last week, 2 agents from the Charleston office. Standard interference inspection, same as this." I waited. They never checked back in. No calls, no reports. Their vehicle was found in the parking lot 3 days later. Empty. Sharon turned to stare at her. Braden went very still. "You knew that," I said. "Before we came." "Yes. And you didn't tell us." Phyllis met my eyes. "If I had, would you have come?" I didn't answer. Probably not. That was the honest answer, and she knew it. The countdown timer hit 14 minutes even. Braden moved to the controls first. I didn't see him decide. Just saw him reach for the console panel with the azimuth and elevation dials, the kind with detents every 5 degrees and manual override switches below them. He flipped both overrides to the left and turned the azimuth dial clockwise. The motors responded. I heard them spin up through the floor, a low, grinding whir from somewhere outside or below us. Felt the vibration change in the walls. For maybe 3 seconds I thought it would work. Then the motors stopped. Just cut out mid-rotation. Braden kept turning the dial, but nothing happened. He tried elevation instead. Same thing. Brief response, then dead. I looked at the spectrum display on the monitor above the controls. The signal trace had been a narrow spike before, tight and focused. Now it was wider, spreading across adjacent frequencies, not fading, adapting. I wrote that down. Trace widening after dish redirect attempt. System compensates. My handwriting looked worse, letters tilting right, then left. Inconsistent pressure. Sharon was standing near the back wall with her notebook still in one hand. I glanced over and saw her other arm extended, sleeve pushed up to the elbow. She had a black pen in her right hand. She was writing on her left forearm, long vertical strokes, numbers. The sequence, 792411. I could see the digits forming in neat rows along her skin, wrapping from the inside of her wrist toward her elbow. She wasn't looking at her arm. Her eyes were on the wall, just staring, writing without watching. Her hand moved in steady mechanical intervals, forming each number with the same slant and pressure. I said her name. She didn't respond. Hayden made a sound, a sharp exhale. I turned and saw him pull the orange foam plugs out of his ears with both hands, fast, almost violent. He dropped them on the floor and stepped toward the wall where a small rectangular speaker grill was mounted near a status board. He leaned in close, too close, his ear maybe 6 inches from the grill. His expression was focused, desperate, not scared, just hungry for it, like he needed to hear the numbers clearly, needed them louder, more direct. Phyllis said his name, command voice. He didn't move. The undertone was still there, the low hum beneath everything. I felt it in my jaw and my back molars, pressure building. My teeth wanted to click together, wanted to match the rhythm. I pulled my notebook out again and flipped to the back page where I'd written Rachel's instructions 6 months ago, during a session after a bad week when I couldn't sleep, and kept counting ceiling tiles at 2 a.m. until my eyes burned. Set a timer. Pick your own interval. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold 2. Out for 4. Let the count be yours. I pressed the side button on my watch, the one that cycled through functions. Stopwatch, timer. I set it for 60 seconds, pressed start. The watch beeped once, quiet, just for me. I felt the vibration against my wrist. I breathed in, 1, 2, 3, 4, held, 1, 2, out, 1, 2, 3, 4, my rhythm. Not the buildings, not the sequence, mine. The pressure in my jaw eased, just a little, enough. I looked around the room. Phyllis was watching Hayden. Braden was still at the controls trying switches that didn't respond. Sharon kept writing on her arm, the pen moving down toward her wrist now, filling in gaps between the first numbers. And I saw the cabinet, power distribution, mounted on the left wall near the floor, brushed steel door with a yellow and black hazard stripe along the edge, the kind that feeds monitoring systems, audio buses, maybe instrumentation racks. I'd seen similar setups in cell towers and radio facilities, always sealed, always tagged. This one had a red plastic safety seal near the latch. The seal was broken, hanging loose. One half still attached to the cabinet, the other dangling from the latch. I walked over. My watch beeped. 60 seconds. I reset it without looking and kept breathing. 4 in, 2 hold, 4 out. I crouched next to the cabinet and pointed. "Braden." He looked over. I said, "What does this feed?" He stepped away from the controls and crouched next to me, looked at the cabinet label, squinted, read it aloud. PDC-7, monitoring primary, audio buses A through D, instrumentation secondaries. Key systems? Yeah, if you wanted something heard everywhere, you'd wire it here. Phyllis was next to us. I didn't hear her walk over. She said, "Don't open that." I looked up at her. She said, "We don't know what it powers. Could cause equipment damage, liability." I said, "The seal's already broken." "Doesn't matter, we document first, then we—" I stopped listening. I looked past her at Hayden. He had both hands flat against the wall now, palms pressed on either side of the speaker grill. His mouth was open, moving, shaping the numbers. I couldn't hear him over the undertone and the sequence coming from the vents and the hum, but I could see his lips. 7, 9, 2, 4. I said, "He's almost gone." Phyllis looked back at Hayden. Her jaw tightened. I opened the cabinet. The door swung out on stiff hinges. Inside was a vertical row of breakers, wire bundles color-coded with zip ties, and a metal junction box at the top. And taped to the inside of the door with silver duct tape right at eye level was a reel-to-reel tape cartridge. Small, maybe 4 inches across. The kind used in old data logging systems or audio archives. The reels were visible through the clear plastic casing. Brown tape wound tight on the left spool, loose on the right. It wasn't moving, but I felt it. A subtle motion, a vibration, pulsing. The numbers got sharper in my skull, not louder, sharper, like they were coming from inside my teeth, from the bones in my jaw. I stared at the cartridge and understood. The telescope wasn't receiving a signal. The building was playing one back. Someone had embedded it, taped it inside the infrastructure, wired it into the systems that fed every speaker, every monitoring line, every audio bus in the facility. A recording, looping, spreading. I reached in and grabbed the cartridge. The tape was cold, colder than it should have been. I yanked it free. The duct tape ripped. Phyllis said something behind me, but I didn't process it. I turned and shoved past her. Not hard, just enough to move. She stumbled half a step. I didn't stop. There was a sink on the far side of the room, stainless steel, industrial, the kind for rinsing equipment or washing tools. Next to it on the counter was a dewar, tall silver thermos, the type used for liquid nitrogen in labs. It was sitting there, lid off, vapor curling out the top. I didn't think about protocol, didn't think about whether it was full or what it was for. I just moved. I reached the sink, flipped the cartridge in my hand so the reels faced down, and forced it into the dewar opening. It didn't fit cleanly. I pushed harder. The plastic casing cracked along one edge. My fingers touched the vapor, then the liquid. Cold burned through my skin. Instant. My hand went numb in 2 seconds. I kept pushing, got the cartridge halfway submerged, held it there. My watch beeped. I kept counting. 4 in, 2 hold, 4 out. The signal fractured. Hayden screamed, just once, sharp, high. Then he went silent, totally silent. His body went rigid, arms locked at his sides, mouth open, and I saw it. Thin strands of brown tape sliding out from between his lips, moving on their own, wet, glistening, maybe 6 inches long, trembling in the air. Braden lunged toward him, got 2 steps, then jerked backward like something invisible grabbed him. His boots skidded. He tried to move forward again, but couldn't. His mouth opened and sound came out, but not from him. From the monitor. the one mounted above the controls. Braden's voice saying the sequence: 7924110388. But Braden's lips were just open, not moving. The sound was coming from the speaker. The building had reassigned him, made him output. I looked down at my hand, still holding the cartridge in the liquid. My fingers were white, no feeling. I checked my watch. 40 seconds left. I kept it submerged. Phyllis was shouting something. Sharon had stopped writing and was staring at her arm, at the numbers covering her skin from wrist to elbow. She looked confused, shocked, like she'd just noticed them. My watch beeped. 0. I pulled the cartridge out. It was frozen solid. Ice crystals covered the casing. The reels were locked, not moving. The tape inside was brittle. I could see fractures through the plastic. The room went quiet. Not silent, quiet. Ordinary machine noise. HVAC cycling. A faint electrical hum from the racks, the monitor displaying a flatline trace where the signal spike used to be. But Braden and Hayden were still standing, still rigid, mouths open. The tape strands at Hayden's lips weren't moving anymore, just hanging there, trembling slightly with his breath. Phyllis grabbed Sharon by the shoulder and pulled her toward the door. Sharon stumbled, still staring at her arm. Phyllis said, "We're leaving. Now!" I looked down at the frozen cartridge in my right hand. My skin was red, starting to blister along the fingertips. I couldn't feel it yet. I would later. I carried it with me. Phyllis was already in the hallway dragging Sharon. I followed. Braden and Hayden stayed in the control room. I didn't know if they could move, didn't know if they were still in there or if something else was. We moved fast. I counted turns. Right, straight, left, past the break room. Dolly was still on the floor. We didn't stop. Past the server room, the hallway with the photos. I didn't look at the glass. We reached the front entrance. The keypad was still beeping, 1-second intervals. Phyllis pushed the door open and we stepped outside. The air was cold, clean. I sucked in a breath and it hurt. I looked back at the building. The lights inside flickered 3 times. On, off, on, off, on, off. The intervals matched my watch timer exactly. 4 seconds, 2 seconds, 4 seconds. It had learned my counter rhythm. Phyllis didn't stop walking. She went straight to the van, yanked the driver's door open and climbed in. Sharon got in the passenger side, still holding her arm out in front of her, staring at the numbers. I got in the back, pulled the door shut. Phyllis started the engine and drove. Gravel, pavement, trees. She didn't stop at the gate, didn't slow down, just kept going. Sharon pulled out her phone, pressed the power button. Nothing happened. It was off. She stared at it. Then I heard it. Faint, thin, coming from the speaker grill. The numbers, still playing, even powered off. I pulled out my notebook, my left hand. My right hand was still holding the frozen cartridge and I couldn't feel my fingers. I wrote everything I could remember. Broken seal, countdown, tape, cartridge taped inside the cabinet, embedded playback, Braden's voice reassigned, Hayden's mouth, the tape strands, the lights flickering in my rhythm. I kept writing until we hit the main road, until my hand cramped, until the notebook was full of details I didn't want to forget and couldn't stop seeing. And even then, even after we'd left the site and the building was miles behind us and the signal trace was flatlined and the cartridge was frozen solid in my burned hand, I could still feel it, the sequence, vibrating in my teeth, waiting for me to resume the count.